Hey there, it's Mary Claire. Welcome to my channel. Today I want to talk to you about trafficking. There's a lot of misinformation out there, and as a trafficking victim, I want to cover some of that misinformation. Now, the first thing that is important to know is that trafficking encompasses a whole range of different organized crimes. There's sex trafficking, there's human trafficking, there's drug trafficking, there's weapons trafficking. So there's a lot of different kinds of things that fall under the label of trafficking. So in this particular case, although I've experienced some other ways of being trafficked as well, I am talking in the context of sex trafficking, which really we should be calling sex slavery because that is a more accurate description. And I like to use the proper words that are needed to portray the severity of things like this, which is why I'm not going to dumb this down and try and make cutesy little words that are okay for use on YouTube if you want to be monetized. If people don't want to monetize me for talking about sex trafficking using big girl words, then I don't know what to tell you. I don't need to make money that badly if I have to dumb everything down. Now, for those of you who read the Bible and are familiar with the stories in the Old Testament, let's go revisit the book of Esther. So, Esther is a trafficking victim, and the thing is, churches don't like to talk about that part, although I have to give my church credit because I was still relatively new to the church one night, and we were there having Bible study, and the associate priest was doing the Bible study that night when the priest usually does it. She has the associate priest has other things she usually does, but so she was doing the Bible study on this particular Wednesday night, and she had said something that she meant in a completely different way than I took it, about remembering the context and what we're reading from the Old Testament may or may not, match up with today. And I said, you know what, that's really offensive to me because Esther was a trafficking victim and we need to talk about it, and it doesn't need to be covered up with this nice little that's not what it meant. The associate priest stopped, and instead of getting mad at me, which I would have normally expected from somebody, she looked at me and she said, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I did not mean it that way. I see how that came across. Let's get together and talk about this afterwards." And so, I calmed down and we got the study done. And later on, she told me she thought that was a really, really important point to raise, the fact that Esther was a trafficking victim, and that, yes, we do need to think about things like this. And again, that she was sorry that she had said something that went over a different way than she had meant it, because she could see how that could happen. And so that was the point at which I knew I could be safe at that church, and I'm still there today. So as far as the story of Esther, if we think about it, the king had a drunken party, and he wanted the queen to come in and, get naked, strip tease, dance, just give his drunken friends a good time. The queen refused, and so basically the king said, "Okay, kill her. I'll get a new one." And so then he rounded up all the teenage girls that were virgins, and he brought them to the palace. They got beauty treatments and all kinds of things, and then they all went and they had their night with the king. So all these girls were trafficked, and Esther is the one that ended up being chosen by the king. Now let me say this: Esther, like any of the rest of us that are victims of sex trafficking and sex slavery, was not the perfect victim. None of us are, because we have had to do things to survive. We have had to keep ourselves alive above other people, and there's just things that you have to do to survive. So Esther would have been the same, because she didn't go up with how it works. Esther didn't keep going up through the ranks by sheer luck. She would have been doing things that made her stand out, and she would be the head bitch in charge, and she would have had to do things that weren't great to make it to that point. So the king decides that Esther's going to be queen. And if you're familiar with the story, Esther is a Jew, and then there's a Jew that gets mad because the king, Esther's cousin, is a Jew and wouldn't bow down to him. And so then this man said, well, let's just execute all the Jews. And Esther intervened, even though it could kill her, and the Jews were saved, which was great. Okay, God's people are saved. But what bothers me about the book of Esther is we never find out what happens to Esther. So I assume Esther stayed with the king and lived out her days, but that's actually a really shitty ending to that story. And what the morality involved in cheering on that people weren't executed at the expense of sex slavery just doesn't seem right. And I think that's where some of that context that the priest was talking about that night actually comes into play. So it's a disturbing story if you really think about it. And these are stories we need to tell in church the way they are and the things that actually happen, instead of making it a pretty little story about a woman in a beautiful dress that obeyed God and then God won. That is one way to use the story with little kids, but it really shouldn't go beyond that. We have to actually get to where we're teaching these Bible stories correctly. Anyway, I'm using her to point out the way that she got through the ranks to be the top dog. She wasn't a perfect victim. None of us are perfect victims. We all did shit to get there and to survive this thing. And so that brings me to Elizabeth Siders. Now, in my view, child marriage is trafficking, period. Children can't consent. So Elizabeth Siders was married off when she was 15 with parental consent in West Virginia. Parental consent is great, but she's still a victim because she's a child. And so some people are trying to say that she's not a victim because look at what she did to her kids. This is horrible. But two things can be true at once. You can be both the predator and the prey. And usually people like that end up becoming the predators because they were the prey for so long. So it bothers me when people are saying, well, her kids were all born in hospitals, and when she went to the Dollar General in the evenings with her husband, why didn't she just ask for help? In the world of trafficking or child marriages or whatever. So I'm going to talk about it in the context of being trafficked in a different way. She was trafficked via child marriage. I was trafficked in a different way. In a way that is more commonly considered as trafficking. So, no, she probably couldn't ask for help, because in my world, if they even thought you were asking for help, even if you weren't, or if you asked for help, you would be quietly disposed of and never be seen again. And we all knew they would kill us if we got out of line bad enough, which is why we didn't. And so I feel like there could be some of that there. Hey, there may be not. But I just hate that people are assuming she could have said something. Maybe she could, maybe she couldn't. I think her level of culpability will eventually come out, and we'll see where that's at, because yes, she was part of what happened to her children, and that's wrong, but she also needs help, and she was also a victim too. Again, there's no perfect victims. What she has done is horrible. She needs help. The kids need help. Should she go to prison? Maybe. Maybe she needs to be in a psych unit. I don't know. I'm not working on the case, but my point is that she is, to me, a sex trafficking victim because of the child marriage. She is a victim, and we need to wait and see what information comes out here as to her level of culpability, because in the trafficking world there is a lot of that. You have friends one day and then they're gone the next, and you never hear from them again because they were killed and disappeared by people who were displeased with them. And so you can't step out of line. And let's just talk about this thing with Vinted for a minute. If you believe that children are being sold into sex slavery on Vinted, might I suggest you start reading a few more books? It doesn't even have to be about a particular subject. Just read them, learn how to think and absorb information, because Vinted is not trafficking children on its website. That is not really how trafficking works. Now, sure, once you've got your group of sex slaves, yeah, you can have an auction them off and sell them or whatever. But that's not happening on a website like that. It's a lot more secretive than that. So, trafficking is not happening on Vinted. It has been disproven, but, you know, people are still people, and some of them have decided to hell with the evidence. It's still trafficking because of whatever reason. Because they say so, basically, and can't handle being wrong. But another thing that doesn't portray trafficking correctly is the conservative propaganda film, The Sound of Freedom. That film, honestly, is pure conservative propaganda. It's not worth watching. It's not how trafficking works either. These things do more damage than they do good. So, with trafficking, a lot of women are sex trafficked by people that they know. Maybe a friend, maybe a family member. In Elizabeth Sider's case, it was the adults in charge, or that should have been in charge, that let her get married at 15. And the way it worked for me is there would be young girls, and some of the young guys, you know, would befriend people. I was living on the street at the time, and so when someone came to me and said, hey, I've got a job that I need somebody for, and oh, by the way, it comes with, it doesn't pay as well, but it comes with a free place to stay. I was like, you know, yeah, I'm sure, I'm interested, I'll come interview. Well, once you walked into interview, just like the other girls, you suddenly realized that you weren't getting out of this. Either you were going to be staying and working, or you had seen what was going on there and you would not walk out alive. And so again, that's where that whole not a perfect victim thing comes in, because the people that recruited me were people that were already in this system, living in this system, and they did what they had to do to survive. Doesn't make it right, doesn't make it good. We were all young, between the ages of 15 and 21. I was there from 18, 19, and 20. Those were the ages I was in that particular group of people. I have been trafficked before. That's a whole different story. And if you do want to get into some of the conspiracy sounding stuff, then I can talk about the trafficking as part of ritual abuse of children like me later on, but it won't be in this video. So it's not happening on Vinted. Sound of Freedom is conservative propaganda. And the thing with trafficking is also, like I said, a lot of people, a lot of women, a lot of girls don't live through it. They displease those in charge enough that they die. And so there is a lot of murder and killing and all that kind of thing in that world. And it's relatively common. But there was an accident one day, and it was one of those things where I was 19 and my friend was 19, and we were coming home late at night from working, and it was about 3 a.m., so actually not late at night, early in the morning, depending on, you know, who you are or whatever. And we were still wearing, you know, stilettos and fishnets and big wigs and not much else, and a lot of makeup. So we were walking home through the downtown. We went through the downtown industrial area, and we got up. I don't know why. I guess we wanted to act like little girls again, so we got up on the large dumpsters in this industrial part of town. And it was like all these dumpsters, and there was concrete, and just, it was ugly, you know. It's industrial stuff. But it's inner city industrial. So, we were there, we were playing on the dumpsters, and, you know, laughing and shoving and pushing, and, you know, but nothing that was a fight. It was just, we were just having fun. I mean, giggling, laughing. And I pushed her, and she fell onto the concrete. And from what I know, she died pretty much straight away. So even in this, it was an accident. It's bothered me my whole life since, you know, I just went off the rails even more, and, you know, often wished it had been me, but it was a freak accident. I wasn't legally culpable for it. But the bit that disturbed me the most in the end was the way Amelia was treated. It was, oh, another dead prostitute, okay. You know, no family to come for her, none of that. So that's what bothered me a lot about that. And that's just one of the different kinds of, you know, her death was different. It was an accident. It was horrible. I was the one that had done the action that put her on the ground and killed her. And so there's been that guilt and everything. And so that also happens in that kind of world. You know, you do things that are accidents that turn out badly, and then, you know, things also happen to you that turn out badly. So, again, just the points that I've raised before. It's sex trafficking or sex slavery that I'm talking about here. There are other kinds of trafficking, again, weapons, drugs, human, other things as well. There's no perfect victims. Child marriage is trafficking. And Vinted is not selling children online, and The Sound of Freedom is a conservative propaganda film. And so that is where I want to leave it today, because I feel like it's a little bit shorter video, but that it's important, and the information needs to sink in, and I may or may not do other videos on this topic depending on the interest in that. So anyway, I'm gonna go for now. Good night.